He is standing at the edge of the Tlatelolco market, the largest market on earth, and he is pressing a folded codex against his chest with both hands. The amatl bark paper is soft from years of handling, its edges bleeding cochineal red where the pigment never fully dried, and inside it are the tribute tallies of 10,000 subject towns, every bolt of cotton, every basket of cacao, every living captive delivered to Tenochtitlan on schedule. He knows this empire's weight better than almost anyone alive, and right now, something is wrong. Word has come from the coast. Strangers. Floating mountains on the water, men wrapped in metal, creatures no one has a name for. Behind him, 50,000 people are buying and selling, the largest market in the Western Hemisphere. He's not hearing any of it. He is staring east. The codex in his hands records the loyalty of millions, but loyalty recorded on paper and loyalty that holds under pressure, he knows better than anyone, are not the same thing. Who is this man? And why does the record he's kept his entire life suddenly feel like evidence of something he wasn't supposed to see? His name is Tezozomoc the Younger. He is 34 years old, a tribute recorder and market overseer for the Triple Alliance in Tenochtitlan, the administrative backbone of the Aztec Empire. His job every single day is to track what the subject peoples owe, what they've paid, and what happens to them when they don't. He's done the math, the population, the causeways, the garrison sizes, and the math is telling him something the emperor doesn't want to hear. In 1519, the Aztec Empire controls somewhere between 5 and 6 million people across 38 provinces. It demands from them 200,000 cotton garments per year, tens of thousands of bushels of maize, thousands of human beings for ritual sacrifice, and it has never, not once, lost a war. Here's what Tezozomoc also knows, because it's literally in his codex. 38 subject provinces, dozens of peoples who pay under duress, entire nations that were conquered within living memory and have not forgotten it. He records their tribute, he does not record their hatred. And now strangers from the sea are walking toward all of that. And that's just the beginning. Because the real question isn't how 200 soldiers defeated 5 million people. The real question is, why did 5 million people let them? Here is what this video is actually about. Not guns, not germs, not steel. Those things existed. They mattered at the margins, but they are not the reason the Aztec Empire was rubble by August 13th, 1521. What we're going to walk through is a structural failure so complete, so predictable in hindsight, that historians have spent 500 years trying to look away from it, because what it implies is uncomfortable. The Aztec Empire wasn't conquered from the outside. It collapsed from within. Hernán Cortés didn't defeat the Aztecs. He found the cracks that were already there and handed a sledgehammer to the people living inside them. By the end of this, you'll understand why the siege of Tenochtitlan was, in every meaningful sense, a civil war. You'll understand why the indigenous coalition that destroyed the empire outnumbered the Spanish 200 to 1. And you'll see why the exact same structural flaw, power built on extraction rather than legitimacy, keeps destroying powerful systems right up to today. At some point in Act 2, you're going to hear a number, the actual size of the indigenous army that fought alongside Cortés, and it is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about who really conquered the Aztec Empire. Don't skip ahead. The setup is everything. To understand how the Aztec Empire fell, you have to first understand what it actually was, because most people have the wrong picture entirely. The people we call the Aztecs called themselves the Mexica, and in 1325 they built their capital, Tenochtitlan, on a marshy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. By the early 1400s, they were a minor power, vassals essentially, paying tribute to the Tepanec Empire. Then, in 1428, three city-states, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, formed what they called the Triple Alliance. Within a generation, they had flipped the entire power structure of central Mexico. By 1519, Tenochtitlan is a city of 200,000 to 300,000 people. That makes it 5 times larger than London at the same moment in history. The market that Tezozomoc oversees, Tlatelolco, processes an estimated 60,000 transactions per day. The causeways connecting the island city to the mainland are engineered to a standard that European visitors will later describe in disbelief. Hernán Cortés himself writes to King Charles I of Spain that he cannot find the words in any language he knows to describe what he is seeing. This is not a primitive civilization. This is a sophisticated imperial state. And its military is extraordinary. The Aztec warrior tradition is built around a concept called the Flower Wars, ritualized combat designed not primarily to kill enemies, but to capture them alive for sacrifice. Elite warriors, the Jaguar and Eagle Knights, are professional soldiers who have spent their entire lives in this system. The Empire has mobilized armies of 200,000 men within living memory. It has conquered, by 1519, 38 distinct provinces spanning modern-day Mexico from the Gulf Coast to the Pacific. But here is the mechanism that makes it all run, and the mechanism that will destroy it. The Aztec Empire is not a unified nation-state. It is a tributary empire, and there is a profound difference. When the Aztecs conquer a region, they don't absorb it. They don't integrate it. They don't build roads connecting it to Tenochtitlan, or send Mexica settlers to intermarry with the locals. They leave the existing rulers in place. They leave the local culture intact. They do one thing. They impose a tribute schedule. Cotton, cacao, jade, feathers, maize, and human beings. Every 80 days, the length of one Aztec calendar period, tribute collectors arrive. They count what's owed, they take it, they leave. The subject peoples are not Aztecs. They are not becoming Aztecs. They are simply paying. Under the implicit threat that non-payment means military destruction. This system is extraordinarily efficient for wealth extraction. It is catastrophically fragile for anything else. Because it means the Aztec Empire, at its height, is sitting on top of dozens of distinct peoples who have every reason to resent their overlords and zero reason to defend them. The Tlaxcalans, east of Tenochtitlan, have never been conquered. The Aztecs actually maintained a permanent low-grade war with them, partly to generate sacrificial captives. By 1519, the Tlaxcalans have been fighting the Aztec Empire for decades. They are experienced, organized, furious, and waiting. The Totonacs on the Gulf Coast were conquered in the 1450s and have resented it ever since. The Texcocans, technically part of the Triple Alliance, are in the middle of a succession crisis that has left a faction of their ruling class actively hostile to Tenochtitlan. The empire looks, from the outside, like a monolith. From the inside, it is a coalition of grievances held together by the fear of Aztec armies. And then, in April of 1519, on the Gulf Coast near modern-day Veracruz, 11 Spanish ships drop anchor. Hernán Cortés is 34 years old when he lands in Mexico. He is not, by any standard measure, an impressive military commander. He has no formal military training. He participated in the conquest of Cuba, which was not exactly a test of strategic genius. He has brought with him 11 ships, roughly 500 soldiers, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons. 500 soldiers, against an empire of millions. What Cortés has, and this is the thing that changes everything, is an almost preternatural ability to read political situations. He is not a general. He is a political operator in armor. Within days of landing, he makes contact with the Totonacs. They are a subject people. They pay tribute. They hate it. Cortés listens to them describe their situation, and something clicks. He is not looking at an empire. He is looking at a pressure vessel. He makes a decision that, in retrospect, is the entire conquest. He tells the Totonacs to stop paying tribute. When Aztec tribute collectors arrive, 5 of them in their official regalia, Cortez has them arrested. Then, quietly, he releases 2 of them and sends a message to Moctezuma. I am your friend. Those other men arrested your collectors. I freed them. He has just played both sides of a political conflict within the first weeks of arriving on the continent. By August 1519, Cortez is marching toward Tenochtitlan. He reaches Tlaxcala. The Tlaxcalans attack him. Of course they do. They don't know who he is or what he wants. There are several battles over several weeks. The Spanish suffer real casualties. Cortez nearly loses. But the Tlaxcalans are watching closely, and what they see is this. These strangers fight differently. They cannot be captured in the traditional way, and they do not break. After the final battle, the Tlaxcalan leadership makes a calculation. The enemy of my enemy. On September 23, 1519, the Tlaxcalans and the Spanish form an alliance. Right here, not the landing, not the first skirmish, this is where the empire's fate turns. Because Cortez just stopped being a foreign raider and started being someone's liberator. Not when Cortez landed, not when he met Moctezuma. Here, when 150,000 Tlaxcalan warriors, battle-hardened, motivated by decades of conflict with Tenochtitlan, decide that these strangers from the sea are their best opportunity in a generation. Now. Remember the man at the beginning of this video, pressing his tribute codex against his chest, staring east, feeling something was wrong? He was right, but not for the reason he thought. He thought the threat was the strangers. The strangers were almost irrelevant. The threat was what the strangers represented, a catalyst, a spark dropped into a room that had been filling with gas for 100 years. The subject peoples of the Aztec Empire didn't need to be convinced to resist. They needed a viable coalition to join. Cortez gave them one. But here's where it gets stranger than anyone expects. When Cortez and his allies enter Tenochtitlan in November 1519, Moctezuma II does not resist. He invites them in. He gives Cortez gifts. He submits, or appears to submit, to Spanish authority. And historians have argued for 5 centuries about why. The most popular explanation, repeated endlessly, is that Moctezuma believed Cortez was the returning god Quetzalcoatl. That story is almost certainly Spanish propaganda, constructed after the fact. What actually happened is this. Moctezuma was managing a political crisis. His empire was fracturing. His tributary system was under strain. He had rivals within his own ruling class. And he made the same calculation that many rulers make when confronted with an unfamiliar threat. He tried to co-opt it. Bring the strangers inside the city, control them, use them as a political tool in his internal conflicts. It was not superstition. It was a political miscalculation, a catastrophic one. By June 1520, the Spanish had taken Moctezuma hostage inside his own palace. When Moctezuma appeared before his own people to urge calm, they stoned him, their own emperor. He died 3 days later. Whether killed by the Spanish or by his own people remains disputed to this day. Then came La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, June 30th, 1520. The Mexica rose up and drove the Spanish and their allies out of Tenochtitlan. Cortez lost 600 of his own men and thousands of Tlaxcalan allies in a single night. He wept, reportedly, under a tree on the causeway. And then he came back. The siege of Tenochtitlan began in May 1521. And here are the numbers, because the numbers are the whole point. Spanish soldiers, approximately 900. Indigenous allies fighting alongside them, somewhere between 200,000 and 240,000. Tlaxcalans, Texcocans, Totonacs, Huechotsincans, peoples who had spent generations under Aztec tribute demands and were now, finally, dismantling the machine. For 79 days, Tenochtitlan held. The causeways were cut, the lake was blockaded, and the city slowly ran out of everything: food, water, places to bury its dead. Cortez cut the causeways. He blockaded the lake with brigantines, small warships his men had built inland and carried in pieces to the lake. He destroyed the aqueduct supplying fresh water to the island city. And then he waited, while disease, smallpox, introduced months earlier, moved through a population with no immunity. On August 13th, 1521, the last Aztec emperor, Cuauhtémoc, was captured trying to escape by canoe. Tenochtitlan was rubble. The population had fallen from perhaps 300,000 to tens of thousands in the span of a siege. But here is what that story omits, what gets lost in the drama of conquest. The Tlaxcalans won. They achieved what they had been fighting for. The Aztec tribute system was gone. And for a generation, the Spanish actually honored their alliance with Tlaxcala. The city was granted special status, exempted from the encomienda labor system that enslaved other indigenous peoples, allowed to maintain its own government. From ashes to insights, the Tlaxcalans had read the situation correctly. They had chosen the winning side in a war that was, at its core, about who would dominate central Mexico. The Aztec Empire fell not because it was weak in the conventional sense. It fell because it had built power on a foundation that required constant coercion, and the moment a credible alternative appeared, the coerced chose the alternative. Now, look at today. In 2023, the Fragile States Index, compiled annually by the Fund for Peace, listed 36 countries in the alert or high alert category. These are states where central governments extract resources from peripheral populations without delivering security, services, or legitimacy in return. Sound familiar? The specific mechanism changes. The structural failure is identical. The Soviet Union in 1991. Yugoslavia between 1991 and 1995. Sudan, which split into two countries in 2011 after decades of extractive central governance. In each case, the empire, the central power, looked overwhelming from the outside. Massive armies, sophisticated bureaucracies, centuries of institutional momentum. And in each case, when a viable alternative coalition appeared, the subject peoples chose it. Not because they were conquered, because they were already waiting. Learn from the past to shape the future. The Aztec collapse is not a story about military technology. It is a story about legitimacy, about whether the people inside your system believe the system is theirs, or believe they are simply being processed by it. The Spanish Empire, incidentally, would learn this lesson the hard way. By 1821, exactly 300 years after the fall of Tenochtitlan, every major Spanish colony in the Americas had revolted and achieved independence. The extractive model failed again, on schedule. Tezozomoc the Younger stood at the edge of the greatest market on earth, pressing his codex of tribute tallies against his chest, and felt that something was wrong. He was the most precise man in the empire. He knew exactly what every subject town owed, and exactly what happened when they didn't pay. What he couldn't record, what no codex could hold, was the difference between a people who are with you and a people who are just waiting for the moment they don't have to be. Every empire that has ever fallen thought it was the exception to that rule. The Tlaxcalans helped destroy the Aztec Empire. The Spanish then built a new empire on the same land, and 300 years later, it collapsed in the same way for the same reasons. If the Aztec collapse is the template, then the Spanish colonial collapse is the proof. And that story, how the inheritors of Tenochtitlan eventually turned on their new overlords, is the next question this video raises. The Spanish had their version of this story, the Mexica had theirs, and the Tlaxcalans, the allies who actually broke the empire, barely get a footnote in most accounts. That's the next one. If you want to catch it when it comes out, the bell is right there. But more importantly, if someone you know is convinced that Cortez won this war, send them this video first. Let them argue with the numbers.